In the last 20 years, we have seen a rather interesting expansion that somewhere in the last couple of years has really turned into this uncontrolled proliferation. So what started off with this desire 20 years ago to keep everything in one CRM system with a few other tools became a slightly bigger market 10 years ago, right? Even 10 years ago, if you were in this industry, you knew we had a few CRMs, we had a few sales tools, but it was manageable. I think somewhere in the last 3 to 4 years, we've really reached that moment, that tipping point, where now we're just adding tools at an uncontrollable pace. So I'll give you some numbers. I'm a little bit obsessed about this. Back in 2019, there were 420 CRM systems on G2 Crowd. Today, there are 765. That is probably more than the number of toothbrush brands in the world. So just think about this for a minute. There are nearly 1,000 CRM systems, and none of us know more than 10 or 20. And on top of those CRM systems, we now have all these thousands and thousands of one-trick apps, as as Ahmed will share with us later. These apps just that do this one thing or these two things. And so we have this situation where we started expanding, but now this expansion has become relatively unmanageable. And what we've learned from our experience with our community is that there are new silos and new breakpoints and new gaps and chasms that have been created because of this proliferation of CRMs and tools. Here are some of the few. In this wild, wild west, we're seeing a big gap between the data that exists, and there's way too much data, and the actual specific guidance that people need at a given moment in time. There's a lot of footloose, like lightweight insights that many tools offer, but very few that actually tell you exactly what to do, when, where, and how. We've seen that as sales and marketing have gotten more and more tools, they've become healthier. But on the other hand, with customer success and sales engineering and some of the other teams that don't have as many tools, you have this rich and poor scenario within the same go-to-market team with more silos being created pre and post-sales. CFOs and CIOs usually love each other, right? But we're also seeing that there's a C-suite dialogue where CIOs are asking the CROs, the CFOs, and CIOs the hard questions. You've spent all these billions of dollars. What's the value we're getting? Why are we still not beating our forecasts? Ahmed, from your vantage point as a revenue leader at some of the world's leading companies in Silicon Valley, have you experienced some of these challenges, and what has been your journey through these silos?
That's a great question. I mean, I totally empathize with this because I'm a living, breathing proof of this. Over the last, I would say about 7 to 8 years, I have seen a massive explosion in terms of the single point solutions that are being addressed in the market, right? And these are all sort of solving these innate issues across the sales organization, marketing organization. Now, what ends up happening is that from my perspective, when I step into an organization, what I start to see is that there are all these solutions that are in place. Some are just owned by a single go-to-market function, but they're not sort of kind of widely accepted, but you're still managing it. So you have this explosion of tools across your sales stack. So when I kind of step into a role, what I try to see is that how is that solving our issues? The bigger question, the why, like why do you need these tools and what is it trying to solve for? When you start to kind of go down this path of asking these questions, why, what, and how, what ends up happening is that you start finding these gaps into how they actually communicate with you. And what you end up finding is that you're not getting the usage out of them that, as you would see. And the challenges from my perspective that I always come across is that how do I see the value? How are these actually providing value to the sales organization? When you try to kind of do reporting or any sort of like an ROI type of metric, what do you end up finding out? That they may be robust in one area, but they are not robust in every other point. Where you want to import the data from this tool to your data warehouse, right? All of a sudden, what you find out is that they don't have a connection to your API that you can kind of leverage, and all of a sudden now you're doing downloading things into Excel or Google Sheets and trying to do these ad hoc reporting to find these ROIs that you ultimately have to go and see if is that driving any value. So, it becomes this exponential, like almost nightmare for a revenue ops leader to kind of manage, right? And if we don't step back and ask those key questions, why, what, and how, and what we are really trying to solve for, it ends up being, all of a sudden you're hiring people, right? It's typically in a smaller organization, you have only a handful of people that can have to do a ton of different roles. All of a sudden now you're like a strategy person is managing multiple different tools. It becomes a manual task. So kind of being able to see the forest over the tree and try to organize your sales stack that's going to drive the most amount of value is the right way of approaching this.